good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As I said before, my name is Souza. I'm happy to be speaking to you from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today we have a very popular speaker. So I'll introduce my colleague, Beth Morris. She is the expert on everything immigration here at Duquesne University, and she's going to be presenting on OPT and CPT. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. We're so glad you're here. This is a very popular topic, so we find that it's a good thing to kind of get out there and help just bring you a little bit more awareness, kind of give you a sense of what lies may be ahead for you. So as we go along, we've tried to kind of organize it in such a way that we'll probably be able to answer your questions, but keep track of them, or you could, write them in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll certainly go ahead and take some questions then. But as Sarah said, my name is Beth Morris. I'm the immigration advisor here at Duquesne, and I'll be pretty much the one issuing most of the I-20s for you. Once you're here, helping you with any immigration related issues. So let's get started and we'll talk a little bit more about what opportunities are out there for you. So the first thing in the order that they would happen is called Curricular Practical Training, or CPT. CPT is something that can happen before graduation for those of you who have an F1 visa. So of course the question is, what is it? What is CPT? CPT is defined as authorization for practical training to engage in temporary employment to gain practical experience directly related to the student's major area of study. So pretty straightforward. Who is eligible? All F1 undergrad and graduate students, but not ESL. ESL is not a program that is appropriate to have CPT. You also have to have completed at least one academic year of study. So for example, if you started in August, our academic year ends in early May, that would be the academic year. You would become eligible at the end of that school year. If you started at a different time of year, just keep in mind you'd have to have had 2 semesters full-time studies. Any jobs, and we'll talk a little bit more about some opportunities. Jobs are reviewed and approved by myself or another DSO here in the office. So basically, we have to determine that it is a good fit, that it is practical training directly related to your major area of study. So the question, what kind of CPT do students do? So it must be in your field of study, and it must be appropriate for your level of education. So I have some examples. A biochemistry undergraduate student is offered a summer research job at a UPMC research lab. UPMC is one of the big hospitals here in Pittsburgh. Great fit, perfect, easy for me to approve. A non-example would be that a biochemistry undergrad student wants to make extra money in a summer job waiting tables. No, that is not qualifying as CPT. And so it's something very important on F1 visas when you're an F1 visa holder to not violate the terms of the visa. And a work violation would be a very serious violation. So you cannot just work anywhere, do what you might like, even if you think it's just earning some money on the side. It is not appropriate, and there could be big repercussions. So once approved, CPT would be added to your SEVIS record, and I would update and issue a new I-20 to you that would specifically show what that job is, who your employer is, and the dates of the CPT. CPT could be paid or it can be unpaid. We often will consider it maybe an internship. Your school, your major might determine that you actually have a required internship. So this is a perfect fit for something like that. So it could be paid or unpaid, but it must always be approved and recorded in SEVIS before the work begins. Students must always continue full-time studies during CPT. So maintaining the F1 visa, full-time studies is always required, and that does not change. So Just something to keep in mind. You'd be adding to your workload. You'd already have a full-time load of courses, and adding a CPT job, you'd want to make sure balances well with your free time. Part-time CPT we consider to be 20 hours or less per week. There's no maximum and there's no accumulation. So you can do as much CPT part-time as you wish, and it will have no effect on OPT, which we'll talk about in a moment, after you graduate. So part-time CPT is really what we recommend and what we see the most to fit in with the full-time schedule of being a student. There is the option for full-time CPT that would be considered more than 20 hours per week. But keep in mind that 12 months or more of full-time CPT actually makes you ineligible for OPT after graduation. All CPT is aggregate. So if you did a bachelor's degree and had some full-time CPT, you did a master's degree and had some full-time CPT, and worked on your PhD and had full-time CPT, all of that will continue to add up. And once you've reached 12 months, OPT is no longer an option for you. So we encourage students, to be very conscientious, keep track. It's something I always discuss and bring up throughout the time of employment to just make sure we're paying attention to it. So we said a little bit about what OPT is, but it's also that work opportunity. It's defined as a temporary employment for practical training directly related to the student's major area of study. And it comes after graduation. So CPT, the C standing for curricular, and OPT meaning optional post-graduation. So who is eligible? A student must have been lawfully enrolled on a full-time basis for 1 academic year to be eligible. That sounds pretty easy. If you're getting a degree, you'll be here more than 1 year. So that's not usually a problem. But consider all those words: lawfully enrolled, meaning you're maintaining the visa, and full-time, one of the requirements of the visa, for at least 1 academic year. To apply, you go through a form called the I-765 form. I assist students with the process. When the time comes, I actually do more info sessions where we get more in depth about how you apply, the documents you need, and we'll do info sessions on campus, and I'm happy to work with students one-on-one. So we upload all the documents. It's an online process now. And once it's approved, you get what's called an EAD card. And those letters stand for Employment Authorization Document. So it's actually only issued for OPT. You don't get that EAD card for CPT. And it's a little kind of like a credit card sized card with your photo on it, your information, and the approval dates for your work authorization. Work can only begin after graduation. You must work full time, so more than 20 hours per week when you're on OPT. You are permitted to accrue up to 90 days of unemployment. So when you apply for OPT, you don't necessarily need to have a job offer. So maybe you haven't been able to get a job, you're still interviewing, graduation comes, you're applying for OPT. That's fine. It's a benefit of your F1 visa, so you don't have to have that job offer, which is the opposite when it's CPT. So when you're still in school and you want to do a CPT work opportunity, you actually must first be offered a job. That's part of the process. That's how we determine if you're eligible, if the job is a good fit. So let's say you get the job offer, it's now after graduation. If you've had some days of unemployment, they just count up. They'll stop once you start working, and you don't want to accrue more than 90 days, or you actually would be finished with your OPT and you'd need to depart the US. So what kind of OPT do students do? Well, OPT must also be in your field of study and appropriate for your level of education. So some examples: a computer science graduate student is working a technical job at Box in California. An example that is not an example of OPT would be that a computer science graduate student is working as a real estate agent in California. I think those are pretty good examples. One is very clearly a fit to the major and the other is not. So again, the benefits of the F1 visa are great. Not only are you able to be in the States and study, but you do get these wonderful opportunities for work experience. We find our students do very well with finding positions here in Pittsburgh. Sometimes it could be an online job, a remote job, but most of the time it's an in-person job. So the job is going to be around here when school's in session, and it's a CPT job. But when it comes to OPT, it does not actually have to, you don't have to stay in Pittsburgh. You're graduated, you don't really need to be on campus anymore. And we do find some students choose to maybe relocate if they're offered a really good job somewhere else. So no working as real estate agents, no waiting tables. Basically, standard OPT is available for a cumulative maximum of 12 months per educational level, which is really great because it gives you the opportunity as you finish each degree to get a little bit of experience. So maybe you did an undergrad in computer science, got your bachelor's degree, want to go ahead and do some work on OPT, you'll get a year of it. Then you say, oh, you know what? I'd like to get my MBA. I'm going to add to my education. So then you go on and get your master's in business administration. Now you get another year, another 12 months. And if after that you decide to get a PhD, likewise, you can go on for another 12 months of OPT. So there is something called the 12-month extension for OPT, and it is available to certain STEM degree recipients, STEM majors. To qualify for that STEM extension, you must have a corresponding STEM major, or CIP code, as SEVIS calls it, in SEVIS, and it's basically going to be what the major code that shows on your I-20 at the time that you graduate. We cannot add STEM later on. So keep that in mind if it's something you're looking ahead to. You can clarify it with me if your major actually is a STEM major. Not all majors that sound like they're science and STEM are actually qualified as STEM according to SEVIS. So one of the examples I'll give is something like nursing. Nursing is actually not considered a STEM field. SEVIS kind of uses the STEM designation to focus a little bit more on a research sort of education or career. So nursing is obviously hands-on, it's more interactive, and therefore it's not STEM. So when you're doing OPT, you will need to be full-time. For CPT, you can be part-time, but for OPT, you must be full-time. And full-time could be anywhere from 20 to 40 hours per week on average. There's actually no maximum. A lot of people say, what's the most number of hours? And there really isn't a maximum for OPT. You could work one full-time or multiple part-time jobs. So if you're able to work, let's say, a 20-hour job and a second 20-hour job, they just both have to fulfill the requirements for OPT, for your major and your level of study. You must always submit all employers to Duke Global. We need to know who you're working for. It's a SEVIS requirement for you. So once we have that information, we add it to your SEVIS record. The process itself is an online application process. I kind of mentioned that already. And they're very generous. They allow you to be able to apply up to 90 days before graduation. So our graduation this year is May 5th. So we're actually now within 90 days. So this is something very popular right now. I'm meeting with a lot of students. We've been doing some info sessions and helping students to go ahead and collect their documents to begin that application. Once they've applied, they must wait until the requested start date. So when we apply for the OPT, you choose when you want to start working. It has to be a date after graduation and no more than 60 days after graduation. So once you've got that date set, then your EAD card will have it printed and you can only start working after that date. So always consider, you must really want to keep your potential employers informed, so that if you're interviewing for a job and you're graduating May 5th, but your start date for EAD might be on June 1st, to just communicate to them. There is no way once you've applied for OPT for us to change your requested start date. So we work with that as part of the process, that I make sure you're aware of it. And then you'll have 12 months for the OPT. Everyone does the 12 months, that standard OPT in the same manner. Everybody applies the same. And if you're STEM, you would add that on by applying after that first year's kind of starting to come to a close. And then the STEM students would be eligible to apply and continue that OPT for another year or two. So the OPT process at a glance, you're going to first request it through me. You're going to reach out to me. I, as the DSO, will recommend you for OPT. I go into your CVIS record. I put in you would like to do OPT. I put in the date you chose to start. It'll automatically calculate the 12 months later, so you'll know what your end date would be. I give you that I-20, and then as the student, you would file the I-765. It's an online. There's a payment. It's about $400 to $500, depending. That's very common that when you're applying for some of these benefits, there is a fee for it. So keep in mind, those are things down the road you'll need to budget for. There's no cost to apply for CPT, but for OPT, there is. So you're going to file it all online. And then USCIS, so the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, will review and what we call adjudicate that form. So determine if you're eligible, if you've fulfilled all the requirements of the application. If they approve you, then they would apply for the EAD card to be mailed to you, and you can start work. And once you do that, you'll always need to be in touch with me. As I said, we need to put that information into CVIS. We need to kind of document your employers. If you change employers, if you change states and move somewhere, California, we need to have your new address. So even while you're on OPT, you're still kind of considered one of our students through the OPT, the first year, if you're on STEM, through the additional 2 years. And so you're always still in touch with us. You're on our immigration document. You're still on our I-20. And as the DSO, I continue to report all those address changes and employer information in CVIS routinely, so that CVIS is always up to date. And at any point, we know where you are and we know what you're doing. So that is my overview of CPT and OPT. So I'll check with Sarah and see if there were any questions or if there's anything specific I can address.
Thank you, Mary Beth. That was so great. And students, please put your questions in the chat and I can kind of feed them to Mary Beth. We did have a question about ESL that I answered, but I'll put it to you now just in case you have a different answer. That in an ESL student, what would be considered a related program? So they were asking, will any previous university studies be considered to be eligible for OPT or CPT if they're studying only ESL?
Okay, that's a really good question. One thing I didn't really mention is when OPT is awarded, it's awarded right upon graduation with that degree. So if you were to finish with a bachelor's degree, even if it was in your home country, you came for ESL, you're not eligible for OPT because you've now not, you wouldn't have started it right after graduation. And of course, it has to be earned as a US degree too. So the reason that ESL doesn't really have that work opportunity for OPT is because there's no work that's fitting to just learning the language. Because it's just instructional in the sense of it's academic English, it's learning note-taking skills, paper writing skills. It's specific kind of targeted for English. There's really no corresponding work that would compare to that. ESL courses, while listed on a university transcript here at Duquesne, do not show, they're not credit bearing. So those credits will never count towards a degree that we would offer. So you would have to do OPT immediately upon finishing your program. And in fact, I mentioned you have 60 days within your graduation that you need to start working. You have a 12-month window to work, but ultimately you must have started and completed all of your OPT within 14 months of your graduation. So that's something that kind of really ties it tightly to the program that you've just finished.
Thanks. That's such a great answer, because we do have a lot of students that start in ESL. So for those students that are going into ESL, these programs are available for you when you move into your academic program, undergraduate or graduate, and they are available at all schools in the United States. So this isn't just for Duquesne. Of course, we talk about Duquesne. We want you to come to Duquesne and stay at Duquesne, but these programs are for every school that is able to offer the F1 visa in the United States. So these programs are just part of the F1 visa. So I have a question that a student is interested to know about the spouse accompanying a student. So a spouse coming with the student, and about the I-20.
Yeah, I can give just kind of a quick overview of that. So essentially, as students accepted to Duquesne University, once you've submitted all the documents that show how you're intending to pay for your education, we can review you for an issuance of an I-20. You are able to bring dependents, so it could be a spouse or it could be children, a direct family, relative in those two categories. You would have to show support of additional funding for extra people. So if it came down to that, if it was a spouse, you would have to show at least an additional $4,000 per year, basically just for the cost of room and board, living in the US. And for each child, you would have to show an additional $2,000. So that amount may already be included on the financial statements you've included for us to review for the students F1 I-20. If we were going to add a dependent, we would just need to know the relationship. We actually have a form that we would have you complete and a copy of that person's passport. And then the I-20 is issued kind of attached to the student's I-20. So the student is applying for the F1 visa. Dependents apply for an F2 visa, basically the same format through the US Embassy or consulate in your home country. So it's quite possible we see a good number of people who come along with a spouse or with family members, children, and we love to welcome families here just as much.
Thank you so much. So I'm just typing in the chat right now, any more questions? And remember, if it's a personal question, we need to look up your information, so you can email Intel Admissions and we'll get back to you with that personal information. But general questions about work opportunities, CPT, OPT are great. Of course, at Duquesne, we want students to take advantage of these programs. It only does the university good to have you participating in these programs. So that's why we like you to know about them before you come to Duquesne, because for freshman students, that is starting after your first year, and you have 3 more years to take advantage. So we really would like you to know about these ahead of time so you can start planning. And I think, Mary Beth, you would say that planning is probably the most important part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even starting now, once you're accepted, before you've come, to work with us, we have the immigration portal that we use. Once you're accepted, you've been a multi-pass, and email for Duquesne has been created for you. And we will funnel a lot of the information sharing through the immigration portal, especially when it comes to collecting documents for the I-20. And so really right now is the perfect time to start planning, carefully reading. I mean, I can't stress enough to carefully read the fine print and the details. Issuing I-20s is a complicated process. It doesn't happen at the drop of a hat. I need to have all of your information, passports. I need to have the funding. We review it, we submit it, we create the document, we release it to you. But there's still so many more steps to happen. Once you have the I-20, then it's basically put into your hands to make the appointment for the visa. We know worldwide visa appointments are hard to come by. We routinely monitor the turnaround time, the wait time. In some countries it can be a couple days or a couple weeks, and some countries it's months and months, maybe even a year to get an appointment, and that's just the appointment. So, being able to kind of understand the process, recognizing once you have the F1 visa, the importance of adhering to all the rules and regulations. We do a lengthy session once you're here at orientation to kind of explain these things to you. But more importantly, not only are you maintaining it, then you get to reap the benefits. These work opportunities are excellent ways to add to your education. And, very often a CPT part-time job while you're a student could turn into an OPT opportunity to work full-time, once you've actually graduated. So, pay attention to the small details, check your email routinely. I'd say, allow a couple weeks easily for us to review all your documents for the I-20. Once we review it, if something's wrong, we have to reach out to you. It's going to take longer. We need to review you again. So we're working with hundreds of students, including the hundreds that are already here. So, just kind of be patient, but certainly pay attention to all the details throughout the process.
We have a great question from a student asking, if a student is offered a GA position at Duquesne, will CPT be required?
That is a great question. One thing I did not mention, any jobs on campus are not CPT. All students as a benefit of their F1 visa are entitled as a benefit to be able to work on campus. Any job on campus, and that can be just without requiring CPT. So a GA position specifically, graduate assistantship, is on-campus employment. So it does not need to be approved into SEVIS and added to the SEVIS record in I-20. We are aware when GAs are offered at your point of admission, if you're receiving a letter, but that's always a wonderful letter to add to the immigration portal yourself when you're putting in sources of funding, just to double check that we do see it, but we do not need to add it for CPT.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of students work on campus, and as if Duquesne is paying you, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Beth, if Duquesne is paying you like to work at the coffee shop at Duquesne, that is okay, because even though that's not related to your computer science major, since Duquesne is paying you, it's okay, correct?
Absolutely. You can always work on campus at the university that your I-20 is sponsored by. That's a benefit. And that's, I think, it's just a wonderful opportunity. I think a lot of students like to meet new students, meet other people, maybe, kind of help hone their English conversational skills if they want. But also just to earn a little bit of extra spending money is nice. But any job on campus, students are eligible for and don't need to have CPT.
Excellent. So that's another session. We don't want to get too confused on this one. Well, I think the CPT OPT questions have concluded in the chat, but students, please reach out to Intel Admissions. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to me personally, and I'll be happy to facilitate those questions. For those of you waiting for I-20s, they're coming, so you can reach out and ask about your personal situation. That's completely fine. It's a little easier to do via email than in the chat here. So we are really happy to have you here today. I see one last question in the chat. So Mary Beth, let me read it. Do you have any final words for us here? This student is asking, what if there are no appointments? So if there are no appointments, you can apply to defer. So again, email us and we can advise you. Everyone is different and every program is different. So for those specific questions, do reach out to us. You could reach out to me personally or Intel Admissions, and we'll help advise you on what to do, because it's still quite early if you're talking about fall. So I think it's a little too soon to make that determination for fall. What do you think, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, typically, I'd say, the sooner you can get your visa appointment, the sooner you can get your visa, the better. But once you start getting, probably under 2 months before enrollment, our classes would begin in August, I'd say at that point, it might be more realistic to look at deferring to a future semester. There's so much that happens even after you get the visa on your end as a student before you can get here. It's getting your flight. It's do you have housing when you arrive? I will say that one of the benefits of your I-20 is you can arrive up to 30 days prior to the start date on your I-20, which is really nice and in a kind of a generous way to allow you to get acclimated to the U.S., start to kind of get adjusted to the U.S. culture. So, kind of keep that in mind as you're planning. But once it gets a little, within, I'd say the two months, 8 weeks of the start of classes, it almost becomes too challenging to actually even have enough time to make that all happen. And one thing I will mention that's just good to know is while you can arrive up to 30 days before, you really cannot arrive after your start date. And that's the CBIS rule. You need to be here. You need to be part of orientation. There's so much that we do and that we cover and we go through for acclimating to campus, knowing your advisor, picking classes, let alone tours of campus and getting your books. That if, we get these requests often because of delayed visa appointments, can I arrive late? And you really cannot. CBIS can turn you away at the border. So, really plan ahead. And if you need to, absolutely defer to a later date. Some programs you might be able to defer from August to January. Others, there might not be a start date except every fall. So it might mean a 12-month deferral. But it's really the better way to go is to have as much time as possible to prepare to arrive.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Beth. It's time for us to get back to work, and we will post this video on YouTube, on our Duke Global YouTube channel. So just for our students listening, we do post these videos. There's a lot of videos on there with useful information. So check it out, and I think it's really helpful to you to help your planning. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mary Beth, for joining us. I know you're very busy. And we look forward to working with you. So do send an email if you have any personal concerns. We look forward to welcoming you here at Duquesne. Take care, everyone.